The following is a PragProg Hero's Journey with Johanna Rothman, recorded in February 2020, presented by the Pragmatic Bookshelf, home of timely, practical books on classic and cutting-edge topics. Find us online at pragprog.com and everywhere the finest tech books are sold.
I'd like to start way back at the beginning of your nonfiction book publishing career. And
Okay.
I'll be honest, I didn't know that there was a fiction book publishing career at first. So, for people who are going to end up reading this as an interviewer listening to it, that you do also, I've discovered, write romance novels and short stories. And I hope to come back to that a little bit later, too. But I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, I think your first nonfiction book was Behind Closed Doors with Esther Derby.
So that was the first one with the Prags.
Oh, okay.
I actually published 2 books earlier. One was a corrective action handbook for the software industry. I co-wrote that with a colleague that was sort of back in my quality days. And I also wrote the hiring book, the first version of the hiring book, which was not well titled. And I did not improve on that later. But the first book with the Prags, which is the first management book, that was Behind Closed Doors.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's actually then go back to the one even before the Prags, because really what I'd like to do is talk to you about, I'd like to know what made you decide to write that first book at all? Because I also saw that you were writing articles for a very long time. So at some point you got this idea and you said, you know what, I think I'd like to make the jump to books, which is a very different type of thing. So why write a book at all? Why write that first book and why that topic?
So I had started writing articles in 97. I started my consulting business in 94. And I said, I read Howard Shensen's Guide to Consulting Success back when it was a 3-ring binder. And he said, consultants who write and speak make over $100,000 a year. Consultants who don't make $30,000. No brainer. I am a natural speaker. I am happy with a microphone, right? Give me a microphone. I'm a very happy woman. I've said that on many podcasts. I really love to speak. And I thought, oh my God, I really got to get to writing, because you reach different people with writing, even back in 97, than I did with my speaking. Okay. So I was working at a client who had a horrible time finding people. They couldn't find developers, they couldn't find testers, they couldn't find managers. And I had a job as an interim manager. And I said, I will help you find the half dozen developers you need and the 2 testers and the manager to replace me while I have this 6-week contract with you. And they said, nobody can do that. I said, hello, I can help you. So they saw what I did, and I was writing down stuff about how to interview, how to organize it. They'd never seen a matrix for organizing the interviews, who's going to talk about what and when. And I said, so I actually had a little handbook of about 35 or 40 pages, not because I wanted to write it down, but because I was tired of them asking me questions.
Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, how else do you start to write?
Right.
So I wrote more of this down because all my other clients were having the same problem. So by the time I got to about 75 or 80 pages, all written in Word, and, we will discuss the language at some point. Oh, well, we will not. Right. I've improved much as a writer since then. And then I signed a contract with Dorset House, who was my kind of first real publisher for the hiring book. I finished writing the book in 99. Okay. That book did not come out until 2003, I think. Oh, yeah. And I knew that. So Esther and I had started to write Behind Closed Doors, because one thing I always advocate, especially to new writers, is write the book first, or write a bunch of the book first, so you get into a rhythm of writing, so you're not totally freaked out by a contract. And you can always edit, but if you have nothing on the page, you cannot edit anything, right? You cannot even say, throw out this chapter, mine this chapter for articles, and redo it in this other way. But if you have a blank page, yeah, nothing. So we wrote one draft of the book. We gave it to Jerry Weinberg, Gerald M. Weinberg, for those of you who remember Jerry. And he said it's boring.
Oh.
Thought, oh yeah. So Esther and I wrote it again. He said it's more boring.
Oh no, going in the wrong direction.
Yeah, wrong direction. And that's when Esther actually had two transforming ideas. One is that we would pair write. So this is in 2002 or 3. We literally pair wrote that book. We traveled to each other's houses for a week at a time, because we didn't have Zoom then. We didn't have Google Docs. We didn't have the tools that we have today. And we wrote this book, and we also told a story in the book of Sam, the almost perfect manager. So when we were shopping that book around, trying to find a publisher, we had, of course, gone to several other publishers. They didn't want it. We were not MBAs.
Yeah.
We only had practice as managers, right? So God forbid.
Right.
And then I said, what about the Prags? This is sort of really pragmatic advice. Maybe they would take the book.
Yeah.
And Esther said, you think? So I wrote an email to Andy, because I'm so shy and retiring. And I said, we have this book we would really like you to publish. And then he said yes. And Esther and I did a little happy dance. So, yeah. So, and then it turned out that I had never written in Markdown before. Esther had not yet tried it. So I was working with Andy on the final editing. That's back when Andy did some editing.
Yeah.
And we actually finished putting that book together, and I thought, I really like this way of working, and not writing in Word was a positive experience. So, I mean, Word is good for things, but I think it's a horrible tool for book writing.
Oh yeah.
So I
true.
really like writing in Markdown. And I got TextMate, the original version, at that time. I still use it now. I need to get a different tool, because it's not a 64-bit application. I know I'm in warning about TextMate. So yeah. So I started to write down articles and then books, because my clients didn't get it.
Yeah.
Either they were going off in this wrong direction, or they were actively doing stuff that did not make sense, that made it difficult for them to do the jobs that they wanted to do. So in all of my books, I actually say, here's the context in which this has worked for me, right? As long as you have these 3 or 4 things that set this context, it might work for you. And here are ways that I have never seen this work. So I had the schedule games in Manage It. I have traps in Create Your Successful Agile Project. I mean, it's all, I think, helping people see what does work and what does not work with stories is a really helpful way to write. Well, it's been helpful for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Makes a lot of sense. So let's go back. I like this image that I have. I don't know Esther, but I like the image of you and Esther getting the contract from the Preg, and you're happy dancing, going, we did it. We have a publisher. And so one of the things that can be tricky about that is having a co-author in general can be tricky for a lot of people. So there you are, even though you've been writing in different formats for a long time already, and you're experienced. But here you go, you're going to sit down, you're going to write this book. Did it go like you expected? Did you just go like, yeah, okay, this is what we think it's going to be like to do a book together, and it just kind of from day one all came together like you expected? Or did you run into something some surprises along the way.
Oh God, no. So, so one of the things that you need to know about me, I am a total extrovert. If I am thinking a thought, it's out of my mouth before I even know that my mouth is forming the words. Right? So I like to say I'm a natural talker. I am not a natural writer.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not a natural writer. I still find it, this is one of the reasons why I challenge myself with writing all the time. The more I practice my writing, the better I am. So when Esther and I were pair writing that book and we were actually at each other's houses, I have this thing where if I'm writing with a co-author, we have to keep going forward. It does not matter if we have spelling errors. It does not matter if the grammar is icky. We go forward on the line. You can only go forward. You're not allowed to go back.
Wow, okay.
And Esther wanted to fix the spelling errors. So I would poke her with my hand on her arm. She didn't like that. and then of course, since I'm so perfect, I did the same thing. And she would poke me with a stick. Yeah. So the other thing that Esther did was Esther is an introvert by nature, which means she processes internally before she speaks.
Mhm.
She actually has a pause before she starts to say anything. So I learned how to understand what the index finger meant if she raised it. The index finger meant, shut your mouth, please. I'm thinking. I will be able to articulate this in a couple of minutes. And it never took a couple of minutes,
Yeah.
but I had to learn how to stop talking. That experience worked out very well when I wrote the book with Mark Kilby, from chaos to successful distributed agile teams, because he didn't put up his finger like Esther. He actually taps his chin.
Oh.
That means he's thinking. It's a cue that means he's thinking.
Right.
So if I look at him, if I look at the Zoom, then I'm okay.
Wait, was that
And
something he told you, or was that something you just noticed? You're like, oh, this means he's thinking.
well, he would tap his chin or he would nod,
Yeah.
and you didn't say anything.
Yeah.
So even an extrovert like I am says, "Oh, he's doing something internally. I should let him do this." Yeah. So so by the time Esther and I had sent in Behind Closed Doors, we didn't have much to do. We had some cleanup and some editing and some organizing, but we didn't have much because we had really worked on that book, and Andy had liked the book that we proposed and had pretty much done.
Yeah.
But when it came to Manage It, Your Guide to Modern Pragmatic Project Management, that's when I really that's when I understood the value of telling a story throughout the book. What do you have to do first? What do you have to do second? Some people might think of this as a user story map. The Prags have their ideas about how you frame the story of a book. And I find that really, really helpful. So how do I bring the reader along with this story? And it's okay. I mean, a lot of things with project management is how you set the context up front is how you can then proceed with success. So there's almost always stuff you need to do up front, if
Mhm.
only a project charter. And then you have to iterate through the rest of the project. And I was able to figure out, how do I tell that story even though people read linearly?
Yeah. I think that one of the things when I was looking over your body of work, one of the things I noticed that's different from some of the other authors for you is that you have done a lot of more co-authoring than a lot of our other authors have done. Most of them, when you look at people who have even done 4 or 5 books, have never had a co-author. And then other times maybe they've had one, but that seems to be something, I'm guessing it's something you enjoy doing. And listening to you talk about, where you've come to now with thinking about a story and all of that, do you think there are challenges with having a co-author that make that maybe, I hate to say it because I don't want to lead you down a path, but is it a good choice for new authors to have a co-author? Do you think it's better for them to do that first book as like a journey of their own and then bring in co-authors later? Or do you think there's value in starting off with a co-author and then moving on to things where it's just you in the book?
So I think this is one of those it depends answers. If you have a good author voice and your co-author has some kind of an author voice, then I think it's really worthwhile to blend the ideas to make them more. So in both with both Esther and Mark, I was able to make the book more than what I could have done alone. And we both, Esther and I had already published a couple hundred articles by then. We had author voices. Every author has a voice in their writing. I think that when Andy met me, he was actually a little surprised at how short I am. I don't write short. I'm 5 feet tall on an extremely good day. I don't write short. I write with presence. The people here cannot see me. I'm doing this expansive arm thing, right? I have presence in person. I have presence in my writing, and that's my author voice. And everybody has their own author voice. So I think of Venkat as sort of gentle but insistent.
Yes.
Right? I mean, I hope that he thinks that that's a good thing. So and Esther has a different kind of authority in her author voice. Mark has a different authority in his. And so when I worked with them, we were better together. We had our ideas together, and how we framed them was even better than the framing I could do alone.
Right.
And I think that if you have not written a lot and you try and do a book, first of all, there's nothing wrong with that. And you will need to write articles after you publish the book to publicize the book. But I think it's really helpful that if you have at least a few dozen articles before you start to write a book, you've started to develop your author voice, and you actually know what belongs in this book as opposed to another book. I am extremely good at talking about the next book a little bit inside this book, because I can't stand it. So I mean, when I wrote Manage It, I have a chapter about defensive project portfolio management. And the next book was Manage Your Project Portfolio.
Right. Yeah.
Because that was, once I had, I'm going to put this in quotes, once I had graduated from project management, what was the next problem I had in my clients? What did I see in my clients?
Right.
That problem was all about managing the project portfolio. So I've been writing books all along because my clients have problems, not because they're stupid. No, they're not stupid. They're really smart people. They don't see their system of work. And my books, I hope, help them see their system of work so they can say, do I really want to do that again? Maybe I have another choice. And then I can offer them choices in my next books.
That makes sense. And so this is also something I really haven't heard some of the authors say. It sounds like you have, I'm guessing, maybe multiple books in your head as you're even writing the one. I'm guessing it's not even just that you're like, I'm going to put this chapter in as the preview to the next one,
No.
It sounds like you have many books in your head at once. So do you have to kind of decide in advance, like, well, this is the one I'm going to do? I guess what I'm asking is, do you have them organized in your head? Like, if you were willing to give it away right now, do you know, like, these are the next 6 books I'm doing and in this order? Or is it more like, well, these are general topics I'm going to kind of cover at some point, and you'll just see where each book takes you, like how it takes you to the next one?
So I have the next 4 books in progress, and I know the order.
Wow. Okay.
and I have at least another 4 after that. This is just nonfiction that
Right.
I'm planning on writing. And I write, if you look at my blog posts, you sort of see where I'm headed for my next books. So I'm writing the Modern Management Made Easy Triad right now. It's in technical review because I had written a series of articles, an article, Management Myth a Month for 36 months. I did that for TechWell several years ago, and I thought, all, in quotes, all I have to do is gather these essays together. Well, no, I needed to do a whole lot more, not so much with interstitials, but a whole lot more in terms of how do I bring the reader along? How do I help the managers know I'm not blaming them for thinking this way? This is how people have thought all along. And how do I bring people along for this ride through what I think of as the next version of management?
Oh, yeah.
Right. So those are 3 books. And the reason they're 3 books is because managers don't like to read big books.
Fair enough.
And they would have been over 300 pages altogether. So this way they're under 150.
Yeah. And so, you know, something that I really like about that thought is that you've helping authors think about, like how you talked about telling a story. And in thinking about this too, you're not only saying you need to think about the readers and what it is that they need from the perspective of, like, you know, this is the narrative that we're building, but you're actually thinking about the construct of the book itself too, right? You're thinking about, like, sure, you could have written, you have the material, you could have done it. I'm sure you would have no problem telling a complete story, a narrative that goes across all these pages, you know, and that's really part of it that I think really great authors think about too, is it's not necessarily just that individual book, it's the big picture. What is it that my reader needs? And that even includes, you know, format, length, everything. So I think it's really great. And I think that that really shows in everything that I've read. And I've read a lot of your books at this point. And it really shows. I really like how much you can tell how much you care about the reader and how much thought went into the reader. And I'd like to get back to something that I said that I was going to come back to, because I'm just so curious about this.
Yeah.
Because as far as I know, you're the only one of our authors that is writing, certainly writing romance. I don't think anyone else is writing romance, but I don't even really think, I know that Andy does some nonfiction writing. Some other authors do a little bit of nonfiction writing, but you know, it's more like, oh, someone tried a book, but you have written multiple nonfiction books, you know.
Nonfiction or fiction?
I'm sorry, fiction books.
No.
Right. You've written both. That's the things, you know, you've written all the nonfiction, you've written all the fiction. And I would think that those are 2 very different mindsets, like writing about agile management practices and then going and writing a romance novel. And what I'm wondering is, do you find that, like, the practice of these 2 different types of writing, does that complement each other, or does it make one type of writing more difficult? I mean, do you write them at the same time? Do you have, like, both of these types of books going on at once?
Yes, I do.
Really?
I do. So I've actually find that the more writing I do, period, the better a writer I am.
Okay.
So what's interesting about fiction is fiction tells a story. It's a character in a setting with a problem. And then the character has to try and fail and try and fail and try and fail and then try and succeed. And the stakes are really high in fiction. I'm really working on getting higher stakes. I'm at the beginning of my fiction career. I'm not that good yet. I mean, I'm good enough to sell. I've sold half a dozen short stories, maybe a couple more, and one novella is up on various platforms. So I'm not horrible at it. I'm not where I want to be. My nonfiction chops are so much more well developed. But because I'm writing fiction, I actually, especially for personal essays, especially for the management stuff where people really want a story, my nonfiction has really improved since I started to write fiction.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, I could see that, especially because, again, going back to what you said about telling a story, right?
Yeah.
It's really, even if it's an entirely different topic, you're developing that skill, that part of writing. No, yeah, very interesting. So, I mean, at this point, you've written so many nonfiction books. You're writing the fiction books. Is there anything in all the, of course, all the articles too, is there anything that you actually find challenging anymore about writing? Or at this point, I know that you said that speaking comes naturally and writing doesn't, but you've written so much that even if that's not the thing that's natural, is it just, at this point, you just sit down and go, yeah, these are the 4 books I'm doing next, and it just comes out? Or are there still challenges for you even at this point?
Oh, I think that there's always a challenge. So for me, it's how do I organize this nonfiction book so I can attract the right people to read it and I fulfill what they need with this book.
Mhm.
So that's one of the big things that's different for me about fiction and nonfiction. Fiction, people are either going to read my science fiction or my fantasy or my romance because they like that genre,
Mm,
or they're curious about what I have to say and they'll take a chance on a small book or a short story. But my nonfiction is about helping people see and solve their problems and framing that, getting the right frame so that I help them see and solve their problems, that's not trivial.
mm,
So I find that it's I don't have any trouble getting to the keyboard, right? It's I actually put time in my calendar. Write this thing now, because otherwise I'm human. I had 4 calls this morning or 3 calls. I have another call this afternoon. When we're done, if you look at my calendar today, you're going to say, what is she going to write? So, so I actually spent some time this morning before my first call, and then I have time after my last call scheduled in my calendar, because otherwise I'm just like everybody else. Email, and email does not get books done,
yeah.
right? So, and there's always more email. I mean, or there's more Slack, or there's more, right? We allow ourselves interruptions.
Yeah.
So I might turn off. I have been known to close email and Slack, although I mostly leave it open and ignore it. But I find that with Slack, especially, there's always the notifications. I really hate notifications. So I often close it. I quit out of it. I don't just mute the notifications. I
Yeah.
literally quit out of it because I don't need to see that right now while I'm writing. And then if I only have a 15-minute time box, I only have 15 minutes. But I can get a couple hundred words, maybe 300 or 400 words if I'm really excited about something, and done in those 15 minutes. And then I have at least my words for the day. So I actually have a spreadsheet. I track my various writing in my spreadsheet. I have a book column by day for words that I've written. I have J. Rothman and the Pragmatic Manager. I have Create and Adapt an Adaptable Life. I have fiction. I get to count every word I write.
Wow.
And that way I actually see what my capacity is. So think about it, right? A book is anywhere from, well, my nonfiction books have been uh, closer to 70,000 words or 80,000 words. I know, I know. This is why the Modern Management Made Easy. I'm trying to keep them under 50,000 because the managers really need the shorter books.
Yeah.
So, but if you just say, if I write only 1,000 words a week, you can write a nonfiction book in a year,
Hmm, that's right. Yeah.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, and that's what's 1,000 words a week? That's 15 minutes, 4 times a week.
Yeah.
That's not a lot of writing, right? I mean, e- uh, I'm sure that there are people who have craziness in their lives. I did write my first books when my children were young, and
Mhm.
I had a rule that said if my door is closed, unless you're bleeding or the house is on fire, don't come in. Talk to daddy, right? because I was writing on the weekends then, and so they also went to bed early, so I could do a little more writing in the evening.
Yeah.
But I mean, if you write for 15 minutes at a time and you always go forward, if you don't edit while you write, because I am a huge fan of editing at the end. Right, the last thing you need to do is edit. If you edit while you write, you never make forward progress. And if you're like me, you don't know what you really think until you write it down. So why would I edit if I don't know what I think yet?
Oh, interesting. I like that.
Yeah, I use question-driven writing, which
Hmm.
is what are the things I want my reader to learn in this chapter, right? That's why I find the story map so helpful.
Hmm.
I often do a story map for every chapter. Once I've done writing the story map, I never look at it again. But I do have the questions I want to answer in this chapter.
Yeah.
And that's when I discover I mushed 2 chapters into one. I need to separate them, but I don't know that until I start answering those questions.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not test driven development, it's question driven writing. And yeah, it's all the same stuff.
Yeah.
If you know who you're writing for, and you know the questions that they have or the problems that present to them, you can deliver a solution. It's not for everybody. My books are not for everybody as much as I would love them to be for everybody. They are not. They are for some people in this context, and that's what I try and explain in the blurbs so
Yeah.
that people can say, yes, I am an ideal reader for this, or this might help. It's worth a shot.
Yeah.
And then I'm not an ideal reader for that. This woman has nothing of value. It's fine. I don't want them to read my stuff that they think I have nothing of value.
Right.
I know I offer a ton of value to certain kinds of readers.
Yeah.
And I think as a writer, I made a mistake in one of my articles for software development back in 1999. I got 2 things confused and we published it. And it was in print.
Oh, no.
I know. And it came out, and several people emailed me and said, you got this wrong. I
Yeah.
said, oh, well, I actually had several expletives. I mean, yeah. So I said, can we change the electronic version? Yes. It was already in print.
Yeah.
I mean, I couldn't do anything about it. I could just change the electronic version. And what I learned from that was, even if you make a mistake, if you say you're sorry and here's the updated version, people are pretty good about forgiving you. I mean, the world did not come to an end.
Oh.
They still wanted columns from me.
Yeah.
Right. So even though I made a mistake. So people always disagree with what you write. Some people think I'm a total jerk. They have other names for me. I think as a writer, you develop enough of a thick skin that you say, I want to take the corrections, but I don't need to take the criticism.
Yeah. I think that is something that comes with time, is what I think, because I talk with one of the biggest things that I end up talking with an author who's, halfway through their first book. They get paralyzed by 2 things. Either they suddenly start to go, what if I'm wrong? What if something I'm saying, I thought I was an expert, what if I'm wrong? And then they go back to page 1 or wherever they started, and they start reading through the whole thing again, right? And they start questioning everything. And then they start running to qualifiers on everything, and, well, wait, maybe you could do it this other way. And the whole thing just comes to a grinding halt, right? Because they get so paralyzed by, I can't move forward, I could be wrong somewhere in here. Or the author, like in our case of tech books, that they send it out to tech review, they get 11 fantastic reviews, they get that 12th one that the person for whatever reason hates it, and maybe they do find something technically wrong with it, or maybe it's just for them, they're like, the solution never would have worked because, yes, in their specific use case, not the right solution. But then you see the same thing, especially, a first-time author gets paralyzed sometimes and they think, well, I can't do this then, because they don't realize what it is, that you've learned, that you said, is that it can't be, no book is going to solve absolutely everybody's problems. Every book isn't for everybody. So I love that you very clearly identify the audience, the readers, and you say, look, these are the people it works for, because like you said, then that lets you take the feedback to go, okay, what makes sense here and what doesn't for the project I'm trying to do. And then it all becomes very useful. And in thinking about that, I think that kind of also goes to motivation, right? So a lot of first-time authors are going, what am I going to get out of writing this book? Some people think I'm going to have this financial windfall, right? They're going to have a bestseller on their hands, or in our industry, they'll go, I'm going to change the entire industry. All of tech is going to read this book and all be different. And there are the extremely rare cases that, yep, one of those two things happen. It's not true for most people. And I've talked with people who just finished their first book and they end up saying, man, what I thought I was going to get out of writing a book was totally different. It wasn't either of those things. It was something else. So, you've written all of these books. What do you find rewarding about writing both books, but just writing in general? What is it that you really find rewarding there?
So I find several things rewarding. One is people say to me, I didn't think of it that way. Mm-hmm. So that's really great, right? That I've offered an alternative to how they could think. Sometimes people actually hire me because of what's in the books. So I published Manage It back in 2007. Mm-hmm. I'm doing a workshop based on Manage It, Your Guide to Modern Pragmatic Project Management, because somebody read that book back in 2007 or 8 or 9, and he said, oh, this woman has some interesting ideas. And he finally contacted me, and I'm going to do a workshop for them later on in March.
Wow.
I mean, that I am thrilled about that because I really love that book, mm-hmm. Manage It, and I can bring in a bunch of ideas from Create Your Successful Agile Project. They're not going to go agile, right? Mm-hmm. That's not their objective. But I can take in everything I know from having written these 2 books and help them move forward in a way. So not just the business for me, which is great as a consultant, but the idea that they now have transforming ideas to move to a better way of working, that really rings my chimes, whatever that cliche is. And I think, so the other thing I get from writing is I learn when I write. So a lot of things in my books are about 3 options for this, or even more than 3 options. So I learned about the rule of 3 from Jerry, and Esther and I wrote about it in Behind Closed Doors, that if you only have 1 solution, it's a trap. 2 possibilities is a dilemma. Which one do I possibly choose? 3 options means you probably understand the problem more, and now you have real choices, and you're probably breaking through the logjam thinking that I only have these options. So I find that when I write books, I understand the problem more. I have more sympathy with my readers, and I can offer them more alternatives than I did only when I spoke about it.
And that actually was a perfect segue, because my next question for you was, that for a lot of authors, both fiction, nonfiction, in your case both, writing ends up just being one facet of what it is they do, right? So like you mentioned, you're a management consultant for software managers and leaders, you're a professional speaker, you write fiction, you write nonfiction, you've written over 300 articles, there's probably a whole lot of other stuff I don't even know about. And so one thing that I'm always curious about is, what do you see the relationship being between all these different things you do? Because I think from the outside, some people think, oh, the person must be at the center of it all. They're an author and they're just looking for ways to kind of promote their writing. But then when you talk with people who write, you discover, no, a lot of times, either it's the other things that lead to the writing, like you said, you had your clients' problems in mind, and that was really how that first kind of project grew. What do you see as the relationship between all these different types of things that you do? Do they kind of feed into each other, or is one drive them all?
So I have this notion of practical ways to manage product development. That's kind of my brand. So my blog is called Managing Product Development. My newsletter is called The Pragmatic Manager. It's all about how do we help people, and me specifically, how do I help people get stuff out the door so that the 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 not just the customers are satisfied, at least with this release, but that the people in the organization are proud of their work, right? Not just the developers and the testers and the BAs and the product people, but the managers. How do we institute management excellence? How do we institute technical excellence? How do we make it so everything that the people do is in service of a greater whole? And if you look at my nonfiction writing, it's all about in service of the greater whole.
Mhm.
It started with the hiring book. How do we hire somebody who actually fits enough of the culture or maybe doesn't fit the culture so you have change? How do you actually manage a project so it's not all about when did you do your stuff today, right? That's just useless. How do we create a better whole as a project? How do we create a project portfolio that allows us to see everything in the organization so we can make choices? How do we use agile and lean program management so we're not, I'm just going to say this, not using a framework which
Mm.
is one size, that's supposed to be one size fits all, and as far as I can tell, that's like beige shoes. Beige shoes are supposed to go with everything, they go with nothing, right? So if you are, I don't know any typical organizations. I don't see how they can use the framework. So this is about thinking about your context. How do we make it so we can do this horrible thing called scaling that allows us to have multiple teams in service of one deliverable and ship something we are proud of? So how do we ship stuff we're proud of? How do we work together as humans? How do we make an environment that makes sense for the people in the organization? And that's everything I do. So it's sort of under the managing product development brand. I guess if I was better at branding, I would be able to tell you. But it's all about how do we make life better
Yeah.
for the people and the products so that we serve our customers so that we make money.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. And I think that it ends up being, and I ask that question of a lot of authors because I'm waiting for the author that says like, no, here's the clear path. It's this leads to this, it's to that. But it sounds like it's always the same thing. It's always the no, this is part of a greater thing that I'm doing, and it all kind of feeds back into each other. And the writing and the everything else is, just part of the overall project that I'm doing. So lastly, you've published a number of books with us. You've self-published. You've distributed books through us. What would you say to an aspiring author who asks you about either working with a traditional publisher versus self-publishing? I guess what I'm wondering is, do you think there's a time that it makes sense for an author to choose one over the other, and how would they decide something like that? Because I think more and more, I think it's very different when you first started writing books, that is, the idea of self-publishing was not what it is today. And now, that's a very real option for an awful lot of authors. They don't
Mhm.
have to do the traditional publisher route. And I think it's a question that they want to know as they're sitting down and going, okay, well, I have this idea and maybe I even have a manuscript. What do I do with it? Where do I go?
So I think it really depends on how much of an author platform you already have.
Mm.
So if you are not blogging regularly, if you're not speaking regularly, if you're not doing stuff to promote yourself regularly, people don't know you.
Mm.
And you need a traditional publisher like the Prags. I am not not going to discuss alternative publishers because you'll notice I have only used the Prags since that very first couple of books. Right. So
Yeah.
that's enough said about all other publishers. I think that if you're alone in your publishing journey, it's really hard to know, how do I market the book? And the real issue is not about the book. It's about you as a person. You are marketing yourself. So when I talk about my business, right, would I have written books if I had stayed a manager inside organizations? I'm sure not. I'm sure not. So I wrote books because my clients were doing stuff that didn't work and they did not know what their alternatives were. This was a way for me to get information out that would help not just my clients, but other people who might become my clients.
Mhm.
And I happen to have had a print newsletter from 99 and then an email newsletter from 2005 or 6. But I see writers who do not have an email newsletter now.
Mm.
And if they don't have a way of getting to their potential readers, I often do not suggest that they self-publish, because that book is going to be like too many nonfiction books, right? They sell 500 copies over their entire lifetime,
Yeah.
and that's mostly to their friends and family,
Yeah.
or they give them away to their clients. That's not the kind of book success I want. I have pretty moderate goals for my book success. I want to sell 1,000 books in the first year, and then I want to sell at least one book of some variety every single day over the next years.
Mhm.
Right? That's what I think of it as a successful writing career. So the more books you have, the more books you actually sell. And if you only want to write one book, if you think you're never going to write another book, do not bother self-publishing.
Mm.
Go with a publisher. If you only think you have one book in you and you want to get this one out, don't even bother with the aggravation. So no, because there's a lot. I mean, it's a whole, writing the book is the first part of the project.
Yeah.
Once you get it done, you have to do the copy editing and the line editing, and you need a cover, and you need an index, and you need a good cover. Yeah. And a good index. I mean, and you got to put it on enough platforms. As much as Amazon has really helped self-published authors, I would never use just one platform to sell my books.
Yeah.
That's like having one client as a consultant. That's not a career, that's an employee, right? So I think it's really important. A book is a business. It's a small business, right? I don't make enough money to live in the manner I would like to become accustomed just on my royalties, but they are a substantial portion of my income. So I want to give myself the best possible chance to succeed with my books.
Yeah, makes sense. Well, I could tell you that we love working with you. Our readers, I know, love you because I hear from them all the time. And we look very forward to the next chance we have to either publish something with you or distribute one of your books. So,
well, thank you. I was really hoping, yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Anytime you're ready,
Yeah.
we are ready and waiting for you.
Good, thank you.
Thank you.
This has been a PragProg Hero's Journey, brought to you by the Pragmatic Bookshelf. For the best in tech book publishing, visit us online at pragprog.com.